Good morning. It is truly an honor to introduce our next keynote speaker. Uzoma Asagwara was first elected as the MLA for Union Station in 2019 as the first non-binary MLA in the Manitoba legislature and one of the first Black MLAs in Manitoba history. They served as the official opposition critic for health and became the first Black person to pass a law with their bill to recognize Somali Heritage Week. In 2023, they were re-elected as MLA for Union Station during the Manitoba NDP's historic victory and were appointed, yes, very historic. And they were appointed Manitoba's Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Seniors, and Long-Term Care. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Deputy Premier Asagwara.
Hey! Wow. Wow. Thank you. Wow. Oh my gosh. That standing ovation was too short. Wow, thank you folks so much. Thank you, no. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. That is an incredibly kind and generous welcome. I really appreciate it. I want to thank Nathan for the warm introduction and for all the work that you do in Manitoba. You're a really wonderful person, but a great advocate and leader in education. And I want to thank all the teachers in Manitoba who are doing incredible work and have been through a lot in recent years and continue to show up every day and make our education system better in Manitoba. It is so nice to be here and to see so many folks from Manitoba. I see our little old Manitoba represented in this room, and I've connected with folks in the hallway. Yeah, shout out if you're from Manitoba. Let's go. That was underwhelming. All right, that's okay. Yeah, that's all right. Thankful you're all here. Take that. You know, it's funny because in a very Manitoba way, I got off the elevator this morning, or out of my room rather, to go to the elevator. And I meet a gentleman in the hallway, also going on to the elevator, and he says to me, I went to school with you in Park LaSalle, grade school in Manitoba. We went to school together. You were in the same grade as my brother Anil 30 plus years ago. And I thought, if that isn't the most Manitoban thing to happen, I do not know what else is. It's so cool. And it's great because in that moment, I was brought back immediately to stories, right? Immediately brought back to 30 plus years ago, growing up in St. Norbert, just south of Winnipeg in Manitoba, in a small community, and thinking about, you know, the experiences that I had as a young person, as a child growing up. And it's incredible to meet somebody on a day where I have the privilege and the opportunity to share just a little bit about my life with you today. So as I think all of you know, about 6 months ago now, I was standing on a stage very much like this, a lot smaller actually, but very much like this in Manitoba. And those who were there that evening will know that this room right now is far less sweaty than that room was on that night in Manitoba 6 months ago. I was standing on a stage on October the 3rd that night announcing election results in a room that was probably at twice its capacity and in half the size of the space it probably should have been, looking out at a sea of people, a sea of progressive Manitobans, a sea of progressive people, folks who'd come from all over the country to contribute to that moment and to contribute to a change in direction, a possible change in direction in our province, for our country, really. And deeply understanding that now, what that moment means and has meant for our country. And on that night, in the fall of 2023, in the Manitoba election, we elected an NDP government. Yeah. It was an incredible feeling, an incredible feeling. It was looking out into this room of people, an incredibly diverse room, and you could see the joy, you could see the hope, you could see the excitement, you could see the relief, and you could see the affirmation in people's eyes. On that night, Manitobans elected a government that reflected back to them what our province actually looks like. They made a choice, and they made a space for people like me, a Black, Nigerian Canadian, queer, non-binary, tall, handsome person to work as their MLA in government, to serve as their Minister of Health, to serve as their Deputy Premier. Now, this is something that my nanny, whom I love, my godmother, my grandmother, all things, who is now almost 90 years old this month, years ago, if you had proposed that to her as a potential reality in her lifetime, I don't think she would have thought that was possible, quite frankly. For a member of her own family, someone who looks like her and identifies as I do, and who carries my story. And being able to share with her after election night what we achieved together was a very sacred moment. Sitting down with her and having that conversation, explaining to her what that day felt like, what that moment was like, and who was there, and how people reacted and what it meant. Made all the more so, I think, impactful because the fact is that my nanny has dementia. These days, 6 months later, just 6 months later, she doesn't always remember that we had an election. She doesn't always remember what I do for work. And some days, she doesn't quite remember all of what makes me who I am. But on the good days, on the great days, she too can share the story of how we came together, and on that night in Manitoba, we chose a better way forward. A better way forward. So my nanny was a nurse. She served as a nurse for over 40 years in Manitoba, and I venture to say she was a damn good nurse at that. She told a lot of stories all the time throughout my life, tells lots of stories. She is a master storyteller. She likes to talk a little bit of smack, but she's hilarious, and she does it from a loving place, really a loving place, someone who knows how to see people, meet people where they're at, and shares stories. It's really important to her. It's funny because when she moved into where she is now, she had the choice of having a room where she would be able to see the river, like a really quite a beautiful view, or she could have a view of the street. And there's a school across the street. And she was like, oh, the street, I choose the street. She's like, I want to see everybody's business. I want to know what everybody's up to. And then she reports to you what she's been observing, right? Storyteller. And I feel the weight of her legacy in the work that I do every day with our team in government. You know, every Wednesday morning, I walk down the steps from my office, 46 stairs, to my office on the second floor of the building in the legislature. My office is on the third floor. And I walk down this really long hallway. And the hallway's lined with portraits of former premiers, none of which look like me, none of which look like most of our team. And these former premiers, you know, these portraits send a message, right, as you're walking down the hallway to cabinet. And I walk into the room, and we sit around this cabinet table, and it's incredible. It's an honor to do so with the most diverse cabinet in Manitoba's history. And one of the most diverse cabinets in our country's history. And that table is a place that brings together the voices in a room that have really never been at that table before. Those voices, those ideas, those experiences, those narratives, those realities, the voices of our ancestors that echo in that room have never been there before, and maybe not even really heard by Manitobans before. And it's in that room after an election where tough choices, tough decisions get made. What is the best path to make sure that every kid can have a good quality education and graduate high school? How do you improve healthcare, make it better and stronger so that it meets everybody's needs, so that you address the deeply embedded systemic discrimination and racism that harms so many people? How can we protect our environment and also advance our economy and grow our economy at the same time? When we consider all of these really important questions, we know that the impacts of our choices touch the lives of people thousands of kilometers away, in parts of the province that many people will never visit and may never even really think of in their day-to-day lives. And we are, as a result of that, every day faced with a really big question amongst all of those questions. And that question is, how do we make the best decision? What is the best decision? It's in those hard conversations around the cabinet table, it's in those tough moments where the stories that we've picked up start to really show themselves. The stories that we've picked up along the campaign trail, alongside our colleagues and our friends and communities, the stories that we tell and share about ourselves. It's those stories that make all the difference. We spent years leading up to the election, years, going out and meeting with Manitobans, going out with an intention, very, very intentionally meeting with Manitobans of all identities, experiences, extractions, expertise, abilities to develop policies and ideas which would not only resonate with Manitobans during an election, but possibly impact their lives for the better should we be fortunate enough to be successful in the election. We were, throughout that process, years leading up to the election, fostering connection, and we were building community. We listened, we heard so many stories. We laughed, we got angry, we agreed, we disagreed, we cried. There were a lot of moments in that journey to get to that evening on October 3rd. And we learned a ton from so many people. And that's why whose stories get told really matters. Around the cabinet table, when you're in the moment of having to make those decisions, whether it's at that table or even in my office, wherever it is, those stories are the things that inspire us. Those stories are what remind us and ground us and focus us on what our decisions are and how they need to be made. Those stories are what can tip the balance either way. When I think about, for those who don't know, I'm obsessed with basketball. I love basketball. I'm going to pivot a little bit here. Why not? And I have been obsessively paying attention to the NCAA Women's Final Four, Sweet 16. Let's clap. I see head nods. Oh my gosh. The most exciting time. And I think about the fact that we saw historic numbers of people pay attention to women's basketball. We're seeing historic numbers of people pay attention to women's sports. But certainly, these young women, some of them are 18 years old. These kids are out there playing to the best of their abilities, sharing their stories on their own platforms, directing their own narratives. We had a chance to get to know them in a new way, and I think that's a big part of the reason why they got the attention that is long overdue and well-deserved. And it's funny because the power of stories being shared in that way, this is a different elevator trip now, today. Forgot something, had to go back up to my room. And as I'm going to my room, there's a group of kids, like 6 or 7 kids. I'm not great with that age range. I always think that kids look younger now than I did when I was that age. I don't think that's the case, but maybe 10, 11 years old, somewhere around there, and they're hanging out in the hallway. And I come back out, and as I'm going to the elevator, I hear one of them say, Caitlin Clark. And I'm paying attention. what's this big person interrupting kids' conversation? But I was like, what do you know about Caitlin Clark? Well, they just all lit up. Oh, she's the best basketball player. She's amazing. She's going to go play at Indiana. Oh my gosh, her family was at the game. They know her story. They know her story. And I asked if they were excited to watch the WNBA, if they planned to watch, and they were like, oh yeah, we can't wait. We're going to watch the WNBA all summer. What? That's incredible. That's the power of sharing stories and people being able to dictate what their stories are. So it's not just about cabinet. You know, it's throughout the media. It's throughout government. It's around your dinner tables. It's in coffee shops. It's in our neighborhoods. It's in our parks. Our decisions reveal who we think matters and what we think matters. And we are all living in a time, and we have been for a while now, in a tough reality that in many ways, we are in fact being pushed to care less about other people's stories. We are being pushed to live in silos, to turn away from each other, to focus on stories which confirm and affirm our own interests, to think less about how we can be of service to others, and more about how we can be in service to ourselves. As progressives, I'm sure that many of us at times feel pessimistic. And that's not necessarily something that is the easiest to admit. You don't want to lean into that, but it's certainly understandable given what we're being bombarded with a lot of the time now. Sometimes I think we can feel like we're feeling into the trap of just trying to save the best parts of ourselves for our own communities instead of trying to grow them. But you only have to look as far as Manitoba to know that it doesn't have to be this way. In our election campaign, we saw some of the worst kinds of hate laid out in attack ads, online, on bus benches, plastered on huge, massive billboards across our cities, in full-page ads, in newspapers. Imagine waking up in the morning and seeing a full-page ad taken out, trying to shame you, trying to paint the picture that you are a threat to people's children. Imagine knowing that your nanny, your loved ones, are also going to open the newspaper and see this. I'm not naive. I knew that getting into this meant that I would become the focus of people who would try to tear me down, make real attempts to tear me down, to tear our party down. But so many other people didn't. They wouldn't have dreamed. They wouldn't have dreamed of what would come for them. Attacks on the rights of trans kids, on the families of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. People treated as though they weren't anything more than pawns in some political game of trying to maintain power, as though they didn't matter. They matter. They matter. Our opponents, there was no low that was too low for them. They stopped at nothing to divide us. They threw everything they had in their playbook of hate. And our opponents really believed that that was how you won. They really did. We saw that in the beginning. We saw that in the middle of the campaign, and we certainly saw it as it was drawing to an end. They thought that you win by sowing division and by reaping fear. But on election day, Manitobans decided to show them just how wrong they were. That's right. The people of our province, the people of this country, are fundamentally good people. The vast majority of people do not wake up in the morning and put on their socks, brush their teeth, and think, okay, I did that awful thing yesterday. Today, I'm gonna make sure that my neighbor who looks this particular way and this neighbor who loves in this particular way, I'm gonna make sure that these two folks hate each other. That's my mission today. The vast majority of people do not wake up and that is their mission. The vast majority of people are fundamentally good. And when given the option, you'll find that people will choose to take care of each other. And that is what we saw. That is what we saw in Manitoba on that day and that night. Manitobans chose unity when they elected our government. And I have the privilege of seeing this same belief every day as the Minister of Health. I see it in nurses and doctors and healthcare aides and allied healthcare professionals. I see it in support staff, the environmental workers. I see it in the advocates, the caregivers. I see it in all of those folks who choose a path of service, service to others. All of their stories matter too. And in our work as a government, I will keep listening to their stories, as I'll keep listening to yours, and I hope you'll keep listening to mine, and I hope you'll keep listening to the stories of those around you, because politics is a service. Politics is a service, a public service. Telling the stories of the people I represent in my constituency of Union Station, beautiful downtown Winnipeg, a little bit of West End, a little bit of West Broadway, if you're from there, you know what I'm talking about, is one of the most important ways that I serve Manitobans. It's important for them to know that I am of subject to them. And it's not always an easy path. It's definitely not an easy path. I'll never minimize that to anyone. Existing this handsome, never easy. But, it's, in all seriousness, no, it's not easy. When young people, kids, when they ask about, do I love my job, I always say yes, because it's true. I love service. I've known for a long time that service is my purpose, and I'm grateful for having known that throughout my life. If they ask if it's easy, or I just say, yeah, I say it's not easy. It's tough. But things that are worthwhile, usually not easy. To make an impact is usually not easy. It's always worth it, though. It's always worth it. And it's more worth it when you do it authentically and unapologetically. Our work as a government, it's not just my responsibility to tell people stories, it's our responsibility to tell people stories. It's important for us every single day to continue to choose service. I chose it when I was in opposition as an MLA. I tell you, being in the chamber in opposition is tough, but I learned a whole lot, and we will continue to choose that now. You all know, everybody in this room knows that the work that we do as progressive people, doesn't always result in something historic, right? The work that we do every day doesn't always mean that you have a successful historic election. Those moments are incredible. That moment was amazing. But it's about choosing and deciding in the little moments. It's about continuing to choose to serve and to share stories in the challenging moments, recommitting to choosing that path. We owe it to each other. We owe it to each other to do so. Because that's really how we move forward, right? With a set of constant, small decisions every single day. And again, when I talk to folks, young people especially, and I'm a big believer in dreaming, having big dreams, as big as you can, massive aspirations, things that people will look at you and say, that makes no sense. Impossible. If people are telling you what you're trying to aspire to is impossible, can't be done, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. But I also tell folks, again, especially young people, remember not to lose sight of the little things, the things you do each day, the way you connect with people, how you speak to one another, how you choose to see or not see your neighbor or a stranger. You never know what those little things add up to. And if everybody is committed to doing each of those little tangible things, or sometimes not so tangible things, it adds up to something that maybe we don't even need to imagine it. We don't even need to know what is impossible can be possible. We just need to do it, and somebody's imagining, envisioning that for us. Again, we have to choose to believe in the goodness of people each and every day. That's one thing that we can do. We have to decide every single day that we matter. We have to encourage people to decide every single day that they matter. We have to tell each other every single day that beyond our own reach, those folks matter. Because the truth is, our institutions won't always decide that we matter. The media will not always tell our stories, and politics will not always make space for us. We have to do that work every single day. We have to make that commitment every single day. Being seated at the cabinet table, incredible feeling. And it's something I'm hoping our team gets to do for a long time, really long time. And every single day, those experiences just get to add to the stories we tell. But the reality of life is that just like my nanny, one day I too might start to forget. If we're lucky, age comes for us all. And I might not always remember quite as vividly as I do now that night when I got to stand on a stage in this incredibly sweaty ballroom, so sweaty, and announce to Manitobans that we had won an election. And so I think about my nephew then. He is 17 months old. Yeah, of course I'm biased, but he is the cutest baby in Canada. It's obvious. Just if you want to see a photo, I will show you. And then you can verify he's the cutest baby in Canada you've ever seen. But the incredible thing is, whereas my nanny, if you had asked her years ago if she thought what would be happening now could be realized, I don't know that she would have been able to confidently say yes. But my nephew will never grow up thinking he doesn't have a place in government. This kid, this sweet and beautiful and lovely little baby boy, he will grow up knowing that he matters. He knows that he matters. And because he can see it, he'll know he can be it. And he will have the opportunity, maybe some responsibility to carry forward my story, my nanny's story, certainly his own, definitely his own. But that can't just be on him. It cannot be on those who are just finally seeing themselves reflected to carry those stories forward. It is on each and every one of us. It's on all of us. We can come together. We can work with each other, listen to each other. We can keep telling our stories and build a world, a democracy where everyone counts. I promise you we can get there because we're pretty much already on our way. Thanks, folks.